What should be done to deal with externalities? And what's the most efficient way to do so? This is an area where the government can intervene. I'm Dr. Angela Doku, and this is Economics for Everyone. There are many ways in which markets fail or maybe don't achieve ideal competitive market outcomes. When a market fails, policymakers need to consider whether the government can bring about a particular outcome more efficiently than the market. Today, we're going to discuss how the government responds to externalities. Now, governments respond to externalities in two main ways. The first is command and control policies. And here, the government directly regulates the allocation of resources. The second is market-based policies, in which the government provides incentives for private organizations to internalize the externality, which simply means that the private organization bears the cost. We all use electricity all the time. Now, let's assume that the market for electricity is perfectly competitive, which is an unreasonable assumption, but is constructive for this example. So, we assume that in the market for electricity, the invisible hand most efficiently allocates resources. The market price reflects marginal cost and marginal benefits. So how much consumers are willing and able to pay for electricity, and producers' marginal cost to generate electricity. But what the market does not reflect is that production of electricity generates nasty pollution. If we are aware that curbing emissions would benefit society, then it is the case that the quantity being sold in the market is greater than the optimal level. And one way to do this is by using command and control regulation. So under command and control regulation, policymakers either directly restrict the level of production or mandate the use of certain technologies that reduce emissions. So many early environmental regulations were command and control. For example, clean water and clean air legislation of the 1970s in the US. So here, the government required that polluters adopt the best available pollution-reducing technologies, and each plant had to install the technologies to continue operating. The Clean Water Act required that each plant had to install exactly the same type of technologies. As you might have guessed, this is not the most efficient course of regulation. For one, this type of regulation provides few incentives for producers to find the more cost-effective solution. And when plants are forced to install a specific piece of technology, their focus turns to using the technology most efficiently instead of finding or developing cheaper solutions. Now, given that we're interested in efficient regulation, it makes sense to turn to a market-based solution. So a market-based regulatory approach internalizes externalities by harnessing the power of market forces. Now, what does this mean in terms of the power plant scenario? With the market-based approach, the method for reducing pollution is essentially left to the emitter, the power plant itself. And the most prominent market-based approaches to dealing with the externalities are corrective taxes and subsidies. We want the power plant to produce less because its production is creating a negative externality, which is pollution. One way to do this is through taxes on the production from the plant. These kinds of taxes are called corrective or Pigouvian taxes. A corrective tax is a tax designed to induce agents who produce negative externalities to reduce quantity towards the socially optimal level. The same reasoning that holds for negative externalities applies to positive externalities. The government can also use corrective subsidies or Pigouvian subsidies to internalize the externality. A corrective subsidy is designed to induce agents who produce positive externalities to increase quantity towards a socially optimal level. Instead of a power plant, consider education. When someone receives an education, this results in a positive externality. Now, imagine the quantity of education is below the socially optimal level. So, the government would like to increase consumption of education. And in order to do so, the government can levy a subsidy to increase the quantity to the socially optimal level. In order for markets to reach an efficient outcome, the market must account for externalities. And when dealing with externalities, there are two approaches to bring quantity towards the socially optimal level: command and control, and market-based approaches. Externalities are present everywhere. If we think of negative externalities, we have pollution and secondhand smoke, and positive externalities, for example, are education and vaccinations. But there are ways by which the government can step in to account for externalities. Externalities are everywhere, And that's why economics is for everyone.